So I'm going to sort of bring together the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis. So we're looking at a carbon energy problem here. And perhaps, we get that sense maybe from our politics that, really we have to almost divert from the climate crisis because we've got a cost of living crisis. And I want to emphasize here that they're very much intertwined, and that solving one problem can help you solve the other problem. And ultimately, what I sort of sat there and realized when I was thinking about this talk is that they just have the same root cause. Both crises are caused by excessive use of expensive fossil fuels, which are open to political leverage, as we are seeing with the Ukraine-Russian conflict. So this is a picture of Greenpeace protesters at BP headquarters in London. And one thing I would definitely say about Greenpeace is that they have a lot of people who like climbing. So now the next slide you've already seen, so I'm not going to labour the point. It's interesting, my climate stripe doesn't have as many reds back in the 1850s, 1890s, 1920s. But it's a dramatic slide showing the increase in temperatures since 1850 to now. And also this key thing where you see the rise occurring around about the 1970s. And we have a temperature increase, and I might be being too nice here, we have a temperature increase of 1% as it currently stands. And this is the fastest global increase in temperature that there has ever been. And we call it a crisis because of the impact it is having on us all. Just a really mad digression here. I did a learning course about the 5 extinctions on this planet. And the second extinction, I had no idea about this, the second extinction was the opposite problem of what we've got now. It was caused by mass growth of vegetation throughout the whole world, which produced a drop in carbon dioxide with a drop in temperature levels, and a mass extinction occurred. It's interesting. Anyway. So just our reminder that we live on this pale blue dot. This was a picture taken from Voyager 1's space probe from 6 billion kilometers. And it sits within an inhospitable universe. And we need to bear in mind we have to look after this planet. Now, I'm going to review the carbon story as it stands now with 3 slides. At the moment, what we're seeing is emissions of burning fossil fuels accounts for 55% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And maybe some people thought it was more, but it's a hell of a lot anyway. And these emissions from burning fossil fuels have increased by 90% since the 1970s. Now, this is a picture of the COP23 in Germany, and Greenpeace put a laser show onto one of the cooling towers in an industrial area. The other contributing factor is agriculture and land use, which is 25% of global emissions. Even if we stopped fossil fuel emissions tomorrow, we would still have a temperature rise by 2100 of 2 degrees unless we deal with agriculture and land use. This is a picture of palm oil, basically clearing the forests to grow palm oil in Indonesia, and of course this palm oil is for all our detergents, soap, shampoos, chocolate, some peanut butters, etc. But we've also got huge land masses cleared, most famously in the Amazon, for cattle grazing. And along with that, the double whammy is then that other masses of land is being cleared to produce soya, 90% of which is used to feed the animals. So we've got a 2-step clearance program, soya, animals. Couldn't we have a 1-step process and eat much more of the soya ourselves? This figure, so I'm not exaggerating, I just want to make sure you know that this figure is related to the transport of the food, the processing of the food, and storage and cooking. And then we're losing our carbon sinks. Carbon sinks is nature's way of helping us. And if we let the carbon sinks do their job, they're capable of absorbing about 50% of our emissions. And the main carbon sinks are our forests and our oceans. This here is a picture of peatlands up in North Yorkshire. In the UK, our greatest carbon sinks are in fact our peatlands. They are regularly burnt to stimulate new heather growth, which can be used for grazing of sheep, but also for encouraging grouse to come in before the grouse shooting season. But you see, we need the ocean, especially to point out, unless you've got a lot of life in that ocean, it's not going to do its carbon sink job, because it does it through all the photosynthesis of the plankton and plants. They get eaten by the fish, the carbon stored in the fish that get eaten by bigger fish, and eventually you've got fish eaten by the bigger fish that are on the bottom, more on the bottom of the ocean, and you get the carbon gradually sinking down. So we need these particular carbon sinks to remain healthy. This is a picture in 2017 of California on fire after a very hot season and drought. And extreme heat is triggering wildfires and drought, as we saw in the UK. And I think Jill said that, and I also heard this last week, that this 2022 was the hottest year ever in the UK. We've got the ice melting, and again I heard last week on the news that, and I'm sure you did, that people going on holiday skiing in the Alps have had to be offered alternative activities such as cycling and hill walks. So impacts on people. We've talked a lot about this really, but even in the USA, there have been 3 million people displaced due to natural disasters. But of course the big one last year, was Pakistan. And even in Wales, there is a village, a small town called Fairburn, which was going to be decommissioned because there were concerns about rising sea levels there. Now that's been deferred, but I still wanted to mention it because it just brings it home to our own country, and that's when things often matter more to us. With the drought this summer, there were 2,800 excess deaths in the UK. And the point that I want to bring, because I'm sort of coming back a little bit to the cost of living crisis, is that, of course, the biggest thing about it is the fuel costs, but the food has gone, all our food has gone up so much. With the change in our climate, The UN has warned us that there is going to be problems of global hunger, and that there already is in some areas of the world. And this is due to failing crops. Are we going to walk from our cost of living crisis, which is mainly fossil fuel related, and the high food prices there, are we going to walk into climate damage related expensive food? So we really need to try and look at solving both these issues at the same time. So I'm saying that unless we address the climate issue, we will be paying huge bills for climate damage reparations at home and abroad, with the precious money that we could be using to improve our own standard of living and making a more level society for people. This is just simply showing the darker areas are where there is a greater amount of fuel poverty. The lighter areas are where there's less fuel poverty. Nearly 90% of the rise in our bills, I should say, over the last year have been due to the rise in gas prices. And we're saying in Greenpeace, and I think everyone here is probably saying, well, is the solution to produce more fossil fuels, and will that get us out of this cost of living crisis? So we're talking about onshore, offshore wind, solar, hydroelectric, and tidal, which I desperately read about, but it's way behind in the on the technology front compared to the others that I've just mentioned. But I'm really looking forward to advances there. You see, if we use these renewable energies, we're going to improve our energy security. We won't be reliant on the oil and gas companies. Jill has already said about how new solar and wind power is cheaper than gas, and just one example is a recent government auction has secured a record 11 gigawatt of offshore wind power, which is 9 times cheaper than the current price of gas, 9 times cheaper. Solar costs have plummeted by 90% since 2009. And also, in terms of employment, renewable energy programs can create up to 150,000 jobs in the UK. So we want the government to go full pelt, no new oil or gas. It's not going to help us. It takes a long time to open up oil and gas fields, and the oil and gas is going to detract us from this renewable direction that we have to go in. And we've got to remember that the oil and gas is owned by the oil and gas companies, and that they are going to sell this in the global market to the highest bidders. And there's one particular gas field which is slightly more advanced in agreements, etc., in Jackdaw in Scotland, and it should come online 2025, 26. And it will produce the equivalent of total yearly emissions of Ghana, or half that of Scotland. And it'll provide the UK with 1 to 2% of energy. I feel this, I know it's in a Greenpeace slide, but I feel this too, that one of the most immediate things we can do is to upgrade our homes. Here, I'm going to read this out to get it right, but raising the energy performance of UK homes to an energy rating of C by 2035, so that's all the UK homes, could save 25% of the energy currently used by the UK, equivalent to the output of 6 nuclear power stations the size of Hinkley Point C. You know, we can get more than 138,000 new jobs if we get people involved in home upgrades. What is Greenpeace doing Well, I could answer more perhaps on that afterwards if anyone's interested, but this one, does anyone remember this? This was when Liz Truss was at the Conservative Party conference, and the Greenpeace, two Greenpeace women who had been pretending that they were delegates there, they got up. This was at the point when Liz Truss was going to talk about opening up the fracking. Thankfully, the fracking went, so that's good. What can you do? Well, one of the key things we're really interested in people doing is to write to our politicians. And this is Secretary of State Grant Shapps. We're asking people to write and put forward what it is they're wanting from the government in terms of energy policy. I think tonight is an example of the fact that it's very hard for individuals to get things done off their own back, but if you are in a community, it's much easier to force changes through. So, yep, that's it from me.